G'day legends, Deano from Deanobuilds here, and today we're going to build some chessboards. Because I'm a knucklehead, I shipped the chessboards before I filmed my intro, so you'll just have to make do with this until the end of the video. Let's go.
Absolute full disclosure here, guys. When I said this is the best chessboard I've ever made, this is also the only chessboard I've ever made, and I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing. I'm making this up every step of the way. This project is full of obstacles, full of challenges, a few disasters, a lot of things I should have done better, and a hell of a lot of lessons. So hold on to your hats and enjoy the ride. The only thing that I am sure about in this project is the materials I'm going to use. And to kick things off, I'm going to mill up some beautiful curly Jarrah and some delicious looking Marri. If you've been following along on my journey, you'll notice that I use a lot of Jarrah and I use a lot of Marri, and that's because they're two of my favourite Western Australian hardwoods and they pair so amazingly together. So the pressure is really on in this build because I'm not just making one chessboard, I have to make two. And they are for international clients, so they have to be extremely special and they have to be extremely Aussie. The main thing that makes these chessboards so challenging is that they're going to a climate that's very hot in summer and very cold in winter. So there's going to be a lot of seasonal wood movement. And that's exactly what it sounds like. In summer, wood contracts, and in winter, wood expands. As you can imagine, moisture changes in timber can be catastrophic, especially when there's a lot of glue seams involved. This is something I'm going to have to consider throughout the entire process. Something else that's on my mind is how I'm going to get these little squares of this checkerboard pattern absolutely perfect. I'm sure there's plenty of tips and tricks out there from professional chessboard makers and woodworker extraordinaires alike, but like I said, this is the first chessboards I've ever made, so I'm just winging it and hoping for the best. Whilst winging it is the core of my philosophy, I'm not going in 100% blind in this project. I have done a fair bit of research, and because I'm a very visual thinker and I'm very much an overthinker, I've probably built these chessboards in my head about 200 times, so I'm not going in completely blind. I've just never made one on a physical level. Anywho, back to the build. Now that I've got all my pieces cut to size, I'm just going to buzz them all through the thicknesser and get them all down to a uniform thickness and ready for glue up. So this is where things started to go pretty pear-shaped really early on in the build, which honestly, I thought I'd get a bit further along than this before I had a disaster. These clamps that you see me using are a kit that you can buy, and they're designed to squeeze down and squeeze in to keep your panels flat, but me being like most blokes, thought I don't need the instructions, I know how these go together, and just sort of tossed them aside, put them together how I thought they went, but instead of squeezing the panel down flat, it was actually lifting the top support up and causing the panel to bow, which initiated a bit of panic because as you can see, I've already got glue on them, so I had to spring into action pretty quick, run over to my clamp wall, get some other clamps, tighten that up, get everything flat with some braces and supports and a whole mental chaos of glue going everywhere and pieces of wood coming apart, but I got it done. I found the instructions, put my clamps together the right way, and the second one went way smoother. And now that the glue's had time to dry, we'll bust these clamps off, square these bad boys up, and make some strips. These little digital angle finders are so handy for getting your saw blade square. If you haven't got one, I'd highly recommend getting one. And just as I'm starting to feel confident and I'm thinking, yeah, these chessboards are going to turn out awesome, everything's going really well, disaster number 2. So as you can see here, some of my strips have fallen apart, and this is the first chessboard that I had issues with the clamps and the first glue up. And I think what's happened is I didn't actually re-glue, and I feel like the pieces spent too long out of the clamps, and then when I put it in the second lot of clamps, the glue didn't completely take across the whole glue joint, and the pressure from the blade or the heat from the blade was enough to just separate the pieces, I guess. So this really took the wind out of me, to be honest, and for a few minutes there, I really contemplated giving up on these chessboards, but thankfully it was only the first board and the second one went off without a hitch. After a bit of self-motivation and a bit of positive talk, I got it together, managed to dig up the courage to finish the job, and I decided to persevere and chuck some more glue on. I popped it back in the clamps, which I did off camera, and just got on with the job. And in the end, it actually turned out like nothing happened, and I've worked out how to use my clamps now, so all is good in the land of chessboard. Random question time. If chessboard land was an actual place, what would it be called? Chessboardia? Chesslandia? Chessadonia? If you're a fan of random nonsense and woodworking disasters, why not subscribe to my channel? I'd really appreciate it. A little bit goes a long way. Now it's redemption time, and I've alternated my pieces and I'm putting the glue on and I'm going to clamp it up properly this time. Before we move on to the inlay stage of this build, I'm just going to run over the belt sander with some 80 grit just to knock any glue squeeze out and clean them up and just get them ready for the next stage of the build. So now I'm just going to rip down a couple of bits of plywood to stick on the bottom of these chessboards, and my thinking for doing this is that these chessboards are made with a long grain pattern, and the inlay I'm going to do is going to be an end grain inlay, and end grain and long grain move differently, so there could be some swelling, there could be some cupping or bowing, so I'm hoping that the plywood will help keep everything flat through the seasonal movement of the wood. Well, there has been some pretty low points in this build, but this is certainly not one of them. After a heck of a long time saving my pennies, I finally bought myself a tracksaw. And man, I gotta say, I am stoked with this thing. After squaring up the edges, I'm just gonna do a little test cut on a scrap of ply just to get the measurements with my calipers for the size of my inlay. Now, I know I could have just measured the width of the blade, but that's not always accurate. So I always find it better to do a test cut and then measure the groove of the test cut. Personally, I always find it's the best way to get the most accurate reading. And now that I've got an accurate reading, I'm going to go through with the track saw and cut all the grooves for the inlay. So I'm just going to rip down some of this native Australian Karri on the table saw, and this is a timber that's going to contrast really nicely against the Marri and the Jarrah. And once I've got them down to their final size on the bandsaw, I'm going to move back over to the chessboard and start the process of the inlayment. Inlayment? Is that a word? Is now. And whilst I'm doing this inlayment, I'm reflecting on how much easier it would have been to just cut all the grooves one way, lay that inlay, sand it, flip it around, cut all the grooves, and then lay the long strips the other way, because cutting each one of these individual bits between all the long strips took forever. I mean, it was fine. I had some tunes on and I just kind of got into it and got into a flow, but next time I will definitely do it the easy way. Lesson learned. And after some sanding, this is the final product, and you can see all that effort, it really pays off. I know the contrast between the Karri and the Jarrah doesn't really pop 100% at the moment, but it will when we oil it, I promise. Now that it's time for edge banding, we're going to mill up some more Jarrah, and I'm going to use two different contrasts here, just so they're a little bit different from each other. It just keeps everything unique and it makes it feel more personal. Now, I'm just going to cut these roughly to length, and I'm not going to worry about doing miter joints on the corners here, purely because these things need to travel a long way and I'm a little bit nervous about the corners getting dinged up. And also, if I haven't mentioned it, these are actually going to a couple of young chess prodigies. So I want these corners to be a bit more hard wearing than what miters can provide. So I'm just going to do a simple butt joint which will expose the end grain on the timber on the corner and will just give it a lot more durability. Up until now, I've probably got about 40 plus hours in these chessboards on and off between other projects. So I'm really happy to see these things start to come to life. And even though we've had some trials and some tribulations, I'm pretty happy with how these things have come out so far. And yes, this is black paint, but don't freak out, it's for the bottom. I feel it'll just dress things up a bit, and I'm not very happy with the way the bottom turned out in the plywood. I burnt through a little bit here and there when I was sanding. I didn't realize how delicate that top layer on the plywood was until it was too late, so I feel like this is a really good solution. Turns out to be a pretty happy accident because I think the black looks way better than the plywood was. And I'm just going to pop some little feet on here. Seeing as how these chessboards are going to a couple of youngsters, they're pretty heavy, and I just wanted to create a space for them to be able to get their fingers up underneath to pick them up. And as we all know, this is the best part of any project. And for me, because I use an orange oil, which is made here locally in WA, I always have a very sensory experience. This stuff smells absolutely amazing. So every time I smell oranges now, I always associate it with finishing one of my projects. You can see the way this stuff really wakes up the timber. And in my opinion, it looks even better when it's dry. And without any further ado, guys, let's check out the reveal. Really happy with how these pieces came up after the oiling. You can really see that Karri inlay pop, and that curly figuring in that Jarrah is just absolutely amazing. Even though this project challenged me, I'm really humbled and I'm really appreciative of all the lessons that I got throughout this process, and I'm always happy for growth as a maker. If you like this video, guys, or even if you didn't like it, I'd love your feedback, so drop me a comment and make sure you're subscribed. That's it, I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.